Awakening compassion, the practice that ends resentment. There is a quiet weight that lives in the human heart. It does not cry out. It does not demand attention. Yet it colors the world from beneath the surface. This weight is resentment, a knot of old wounds, unmet expectations, and the echoes of words we never received. It lingers long after the moment has passed, long after the world has moved on. Resentment holds the shape of the past inside the present moment, like a stone carried unknowingly in a traveler's path. We grow so accustomed to this weight that we call it who we are. We weave stories around it, stories of why we are justified, why they were wrong, why the past must be preserved. And without noticing, the weight becomes a shield that protects, but also isolates, a shield that feels necessary, but quietly suffocates. Yet deep beneath that weight, beneath the layers of memory, judgment, pride, and pain, there is a softness that has never been touched by resentment, a softness that belongs not to anger, but to our original humanity. It waits patiently, like a lotus beneath the mud, untouched by the murk around it. This is the tenderness of compassion, not pity, not forgiveness offered with clenched teeth, but the simple recognition that all beings, ourselves included, are learning how to walk through this world. Compassion is the courage to put down what has been carried for too long. It is the rediscovery of the heart we had before bitterness settled. This is a journey into that rediscovery, a returning, a softening, a remembering, not by force, not by preaching, but by looking directly into the nature of our own experience, as gently as one would gaze at a candle in the dark. Resentment rarely announces itself. It grows quietly, in the shadowed corners of unmet hopes and the subtle disappointments we swallow without acknowledging. Sometimes it begins with just a single moment, a careless comment, a forgotten apology, a betrayal so small it barely leaves a mark. And yet that moment becomes the seed, settling into the soil of the mind, sprouting thoughts that loop endlessly. Why me? How could they? What about my suffering? The mind repeats these questions until they form a rhythm, steady and familiar. Over time, this rhythm becomes a story, and the story becomes a self, a version of ourselves defined by what happened and who failed us. The pain becomes a lens, and through that lens, the world becomes more hostile, more unfair, more filled with reminders of what was lost. But if we look closely, resentment is never made of the past. It is made of the present moment's unwillingness to let the past go. The past is already gone. What remains is the echo, vibrating moment by moment within the body. The clenched jaw, the stiffened shoulders, the breath held just a little too long. The heart that refuses to soften. These sensations whisper the truth we don't want to face. Resentment is not something someone else gives us. It is something we continue to recreate, not out of weakness, not out of fault, but out of habit. The mind clings because it believes clinging is protection. It believes staying angry keeps us from being hurt again. Resentment becomes a fortress we guard, brick by brick, convinced that inside its walls we are safe. Yet each brick is made of suffering, and every wall that shields us from others also shields us from our own peace. Imagine standing on a path in a dense forest at dawn. Mist drifts between the trees, and the world is quiet except for the pulse of your own heart. You walk with a heavy pack, every step slow, every breath labored. You've carried the pack for so long that you've forgotten what's inside. You only know that everyone else seems to walk more lightly, and this frustrates you. Then one day, the strap breaks. The pack falls open. Inside you find not weapons, not necessities, but old stones, each with a name. A moment of anger, a betrayal, a humiliation, a conversation that ended too abruptly, a love that ended before you were ready, a word you believed defined you, a face you cannot forget. One by one, you pick them up, and for the first time you understand you have been carrying the weight of moments that no longer exist. Resentment is the belief that holding on will somehow fix what happened. Compassion is the realization that letting go is the only thing that ever could. But before we can let go, we must understand something deeper. The human experience is not personal, not in the way we think. Every person who has hurt us was shaped by their own wounds, their own fears, their own unspoken regrets. Their actions were echoes of their suffering, not reflections of our worth. The world is full of beings stumbling in the dark, trying to find a way to feel whole. Some reach out with kindness, others with desperation, and many with confusion that manifests as harm. When we understand this, even faintly, resentment begins to loosen, not because we excuse the harm, but because we recognize that harm was never truly about us. In the quiet chamber of the heart, there is a recognition. All beings, in their own ways, are trying to be free, and most do not know how. This understanding is the beginning of compassion. Compassion is not weakness. It is clarity. It is the steady knowing that every person who has crossed our path, including ourselves, is tangled in causes and conditions beyond full control. Our thoughts, our emotions, our reactions arise like weather, forming, dissolving, returning, passing. No storm lasts forever. No sunlight is permanent. No resentment is intrinsic. When we see this, a subtle shift begins. The heart, tight for so long, loosens slightly. A single breath moves more freely. Space opens where once there was only contraction. This is not forgiveness in the moral sense. This is forgiveness in the natural sense, the way the body relaxes when it no longer feels threatened. Compassion awakens when the heart finally understands that resentment is a self-inflicted wound. And tenderness awakens when we realize we do not need to keep hurting. Yet the path is not easy. Resentment is familiar. Compassion feels vulnerable. To soften, to open, to drop the heavy stones, this feels like stepping into unknown territory. But that unfamiliarity is simply the feeling of returning to our true nature. The forest path continues, and now you walk with fewer stones. The pack is lighter. The air feels clearer. Each step is not effortless, but it is no longer burdened by the past. You begin to notice things you couldn't see before. The glow of morning light between branches, the sound of birds greeting the dawn, the warmth of your own breath. This is the first glimpse of freedom. And though it is fragile, it is real. Compassion, once awakened, doesn't ask for perfection. It only asks for sincerity, a willingness to look at the world not through the lens of injury, but through the truth of interconnectedness. The heart that understands this truth discovers that resentment never protected it. It only hid its brilliance. There comes a moment on every spiritual journey when the heart questions itself. If I let go of resentment, what will remain of me? Who will I be without this story? This fear is not trivial. Resentment often becomes entwined with identity. It becomes the backdrop against which we measure our relationships, our choices, even our sense of justice. But identity built on resentment is a house built on shifting ground. Every tremor in life shakes it. Every memory threatens it. Every challenge reveals its cracks. Compassion, by contrast, roots itself not in the past, but in presence. Presence is the pure awareness that is here before thought arises, before judgment forms, before the emotional tides swell or recede. It is the stillness beneath every experience, the quiet field in which all sensations come and go. When we touch this presence even briefly, resentment loses its certainty. It becomes just another ripple on the surface, not a permanent mark carved into stone. To cultivate compassion, we must first learn to rest in this presence. Imagine sitting beside a river at twilight. The water moves steadily, carrying leaves and branches from an unseen upstream world. The surface reflects the last light of the day, shimmering with colors that will soon fade into night. You sit on the bank and watch the river flow. Occasionally a memory floats past, a face, a word, a moment. You watch it appear, drift, and then disappear downstream. This is the natural rhythm of the mind when not entangled by resistance. But then, without meaning to, you reach out and grab a branch floating by. You hold onto it, examining it, analyzing it, replaying the reasons it drifted your way. Soon the branch grows heavier in your hands. It drips, it weighs you down, it pulls at your muscles. The river flows on without it, but you remain stuck, clutching the past. This is resentment. When we cling to a moment that has already drifted away, we disrupt the natural movement of life. The mind fixates, the heart contracts, the body stores the tension. We suffer not because the moment was painful, but because we refuse to let it continue downstream. Compassion is the return to observation, the willingness to release the branch, to allow experience to flow once more. But releasing is not the same as forgetting. It is not denying what happened. It is simply choosing not to carry the burden forever. In Buddhist teaching, compassion is not sentimental. It is the recognition that suffering binds all beings together. When we see our shared vulnerability, our shared confusion, our shared longing for peace, something profound changes in the heart. The sharp lines that divide me from you begin to soften. The walls that resentment built slowly lose their purpose. We begin to see others not as enemies or sources of pain, but as fellow travelers carrying their own invisible burdens. Think of the person who hurt you most deeply. Not the caricature created by memory, but the human being beneath the story. Someone shaped by upbringing, pressure, culture, fear. Someone who may never have been truly seen. Someone who acted from confusion, from loneliness, from the weight of their own unexamined wound. This doesn't excuse harm, but it reveals the underlying truth. Suffering creates suffering. And here compassion takes root, not as an idea, but as an insight, a moment of seeing that what binds us is far greater than what divides us. Compassion begins with understanding, and understanding begins with presence. In presence, we see the truth that every moment arises from countless conditions. A gesture, an anger buried years ago, a stressful day, a misunderstood sentence, a heart wanting connection but expressing it clumsily. When we zoom out, the story shifts. The event that once felt so personal becomes part of a vast web of causes, none of them truly under anyone's full control. This insight is not cold or philosophical. It is warm, expansive, liberating. It allows the heart to say softly, "I see, I understand. This suffering is not mine alone." And when we understand this, resentment has nothing left to feed on. Compassion is the natural response of a heart that understands the truth of interdependence. It is not forced. It arises like dawn after the long night, inevitable once conditions allow light to enter. But to allow this light, we must first confront our own inner resistance. Resistance says, if I soften, I will be hurt again. If I understand them, my pain doesn't matter. If I let go, they win. These are fears, born from a misunderstanding of compassion. Compassion does not erase the past, Compassion does not erase boundaries. Compassion does not invite harm. Compassion simply frees us from the prison of wanting the past to be different than it was. And with that freedom, clarity arises. We begin to make wiser choices. We begin to protect ourselves, not with resentment, but with discernment. We begin to relate to others from strength, not from woundedness. This is the quiet revolution compassion brings. Slowly, gently, resentment loosens. Not because we force it to leave, but because the heart outgrows the need for it. When the heart is spacious, resentment has no place to cling. When the heart is clear, resentment loses its meaning. When the heart is compassionate, resentment dissolves like frost touched by sunlight. And what remains is a kind of freedom so subtle that at first we hardly recognize it. There is a stage along the path where compassion becomes not just an insight, but a practice. It becomes a way of moving through the world, a way of seeing oneself and others with a softness that does not weaken, but steadies. Yet this practice is not passive. It requires courage, presence, and honesty. Compassion is the courage to turn toward suffering instead of away from it, to turn toward our own pain without shame, to turn toward the pain of others without judgment, to sit with the ache in the chest, the tightness in the throat, the heaviness in the limbs, not trying to fix it, not rushing to escape it, but simply allowing it to be seen. This seeing is transformative. Imagine holding a small bird in your hands. At first it trembles, tense and afraid. If you grip too tightly, you cause harm. If you open your hands too quickly, it may fly off in panic. But if you hold it gently, steadily, with warmth and patience, the trembling softens. The bird begins to breathe. It begins to trust the space you've created. Your pain is that bird. Resentment holds it in a fist. Compassion opens the hand. To practice compassion, we begin by softening toward ourselves. Not indulging, not excusing, but recognizing that we too have been shaped by countless forces, that we too have made mistakes, spoken harshly, acted from confusion, failed to understand the suffering of others. When we see our own imperfection clearly, without self-hatred, we begin to understand others more deeply. Self-compassion is the soil in which compassion for others grows. The world teaches us to be hard on ourselves, to strive endlessly, to push down our vulnerabilities. But the Buddha taught that gentleness toward one's own suffering is not weakness, it is wisdom. When we stop fighting ourselves, we create the inner space needed to stop fighting the world. From this space, resentment begins to lose its power. The practice deepens when we bring compassion into our relationships, not in dramatic gestures or forced forgiveness, but in simple moments, listening without preparing our response, seeing beyond the surface of someone's behavior, pausing before reacting, taking a breath when anger rises, offering kindness even when the ego demands victory. Compassion is a discipline of presence, and presence begins with breath. The breath is the thread that weaves all moments together. It is the bridge between the body and mind, between the conscious and unconscious. When resentment arises, the breath shortens. When compassion enters, the breath deepens. To breathe consciously is to return home to ourselves. Try this. When resentment arises, pause. Feel the body. Feel the heat in the chest, the tightening in the face, the restless energy in the mind. Then breathe, slowly, gently, allowing the breath to cradle the sensation. Under the breath's gentle attention, emotion begins to unfold. What once felt like a solid wall becomes a collection of shifting sensations. What once felt like certainty becomes simply a pattern, arising and passing, like clouds drifting across the sky. This is the nature of all emotions. They are temporary visitors. Resentment pretends it is permanent. Compassion remembers the truth. With practice, compassion becomes the lens through which we view the world. We begin to notice that everyone is carrying something unseen. The person who speaks harshly may be drowning in self-loathing. The one who withdraws may be overwhelmed with fear. The one who betrays us may be repeating patterns they don't know how to break. This doesn't erase responsibility, but it shifts our understanding from blame to awareness. Awareness is the heart of compassion. As we cultivate this awareness, something profound begins to shift. Our relationships change. Our reactions soften. Our sense of self expands beyond the narrow confines of I and mine. We begin to understand that we are not separate from the suffering around us, nor from the joy. We are threads in the same vast tapestry. In this tapestry, resentment is a knot that tightens the whole fabric. Compassion is the hand that gently untangles it. But the deepest transformation occurs when compassion becomes unconditional, not dependent on whether others change, apologize, or understand us. Unconditional compassion is an offering we make to the world because we understand that holding on to bitterness only harms ourselves. This does not mean tolerating abuse or erasing boundaries. Boundaries made with compassion are stronger than those made with anger. Compassion is not compliance. It is clarity. Clarity sees what is harmful and steps away. Clarity sees what is kind and moves closer. Clarity sees the causes behind suffering and chooses not to perpetuate them. When compassion and clarity meet, resentment cannot survive. Slowly, the world begins to look different. Colors seem richer. Moments feel deeper. The heart becomes more tender, yet more resilient. Small joys, the warmth of sunlight, the sound of laughter, the rustling of leaves, awaken a gratitude that was long dormant beneath the weight of bitterness. This gratitude is the natural companion to compassion. It fills the spaces resentment once occupied. And as gratitude grows, life begins to feel lighter. Not because life has changed, but because we have. We learn that compassion is not something we do. It is something we are. It is the natural expression of a heart that has stopped fighting with itself, a heart that has opened, a heart that has remembered its true nature. In this remembering, resentment loses all meaning. The past no longer defines us. The future no longer frightens us. The present becomes a place where healing is possible. We walk through the world with a quieter mind, a gentler touch, a steadier gaze. We no longer need to be right. We no longer need to win. We no longer need to prove anything. We simply live fully, freely, compassionately. This is the practice that ends resentment, not through force, not through denial, but through awakening. Compassion is not a destination. It is a way of being. A way of meeting each moment with openness, rather than fear. A way of seeing ourselves and others through the lens of shared humanity. When we practice compassion, resentment dissolves not because we make it disappear, but because the heart outgrows the need to hold it. As the journey continues, we begin to understand that every person we meet is fighting a battle we cannot see. That every harsh word, every mistake, every moment of harm is born from confusion and suffering. And when we see this clearly, our own suffering softens. The weight we carried for so long finally lifts. Compassion does not erase the scars of the past, but it transforms the way we carry them. They become reminders of our strength, our resilience, our capacity to heal. They become teachers rather than chains. In the end, compassion is the freedom to live with an unburdened heart. If this journey spoke to you, if you felt even one breath of ease, one moment of clarity, one softening within your chest, then I invite you to continue walking with us. This channel is a place for reflection, for healing, for the quiet wisdom that lives beneath the noise of the world. If you feel called, gently follow this path with us by subscribing, so these teachings can continue to reach you and perhaps help you soften into the person you already are beneath the layers. May your heart be light. May your steps be steady. May compassion guide you.